Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a quiet little trip to Imperial China. Not the kind with dumpling tastings and lantern festivals, but the kind where your full time job is standing very, very close to someone's final moments, with a brush in one hand and your own safety dangling by a thread in the other. You are an execution recorder. You wake up in a dim corner of a shared courtyard house, the type where 9 people sleep. Three chickens wander, and someone always snores like they're exercising a spirit. The rooster is your alarm clock, but honestly, your nerves beat him to it. Even before your eyes open, your stomach tightens into a polite little knot. Today is one of those days. You know because yesterday's docket had 5 names on it. The last one? A salt smuggler who cried about tofu as he was dragged away. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slide off your mat, already regretting the sleep you didn't get. There's no mattress, of course, just a straw layer on packed clay. You stretch, and your back creaks like an old wooden gate. The smell of boiled millet wafts through the thin paper walls. Your wife, bless her, is stirring breakfast in a pot that doubles as a basin and triples as a musical instrument. When your kids are bored, millet again. No pork this week. Not after last month's incident with the tax inspector and your cousin's very illegal backyard pig. You eat in silence. The grains are gluey, unseasoned, and mildly judgmental. You chew slowly. Execution days are never fast food days. Not that you'd want fast food when your afternoon includes blood, paperwork, and multiple awkward bows. The Ministry of Justice sent a runner last night. Execution confirmed. Be prompt. Wear formal robe. No room for interpretation there. You bow to your family before stepping into your stiff black uniform, the one that smells like ink and incense and career regret. Your brush case is tucked into your sleeve, goat hair tips sharpened to a fine, ominous point. You don't carry a weapon. You don't need one. Your weapon is the written word, or so they say. Really, your weapon is your ability to not misspell a nobleman's name. Outside, the alley is already murmuring. Wet laundry slaps against bamboo poles. A tea seller's cart squeaks by, and 2 men argue about the price of cabbage like it's national security. You pass them quietly. The robe makes people give you space. Not respect, just a wide berth. Everyone knows what you do. No one wants to talk about it. You're the man who writes down death, the human receipt printer for justice. And oh, that justice is efficient. The ministry sits behind 2 red gates in a forest of gray uniforms. You bow to the guards, then step into the inner courtyard where dew clings to cobblestones and whispers feel louder than drums. The clerk at the front desk hands you today's death orders like he's passing out coupons. You nod. 3 today. 1 thief, 1 traitor, 1 unclassified, which is ministry shorthand for don't ask. You're escorted to the judgment chamber, which sounds dramatic, but it's really just a wooden hall with uncomfortable benches and a magistrate who always smells faintly of salted plums. The condemned are brought in, their feet shackled, their hands trembling. You take your place in the corner, brush poised, inkstone at the ready. Your job is simple. Record the sentence, the charges, the defendant's final statement, if any, and the time and method of death. The tricky part? Doing it exactly right. See, every stroke in every character has to be perfect. One extra flick, one missing dot, and it could read horse instead of treason. And if you mess up a noble's title or omit the phrase by order of His Celestial Majesty, you're not just sloppy, you're complicit. Imperial law is clear. Scribal error during execution records is tantamount to sabotage. Historians still argue whether execution recorders were more like bureaucrats or witnesses. Some claim they were neutral observers, mere chroniclers. Others suggest they subtly shape legacies, editing crimes, softening causes, erasing names when asked politely, read, under threat. But you just don't want to lose your job or your head. By mid morning, your right hand aches. The inkstone is dry. You've already written 8 full lines about unfilial conduct and excessive arrogance. You try not to picture the people behind the crimes. It's easier when they're just characters on paper. Abstract ink. But every now and then, one looks at you, really looks, and in that split second, before the guard pushes them forward, you wonder if they're innocent. You wonder if it matters. You slip the parchment into the scroll tube, seal it with wax, and breathe out slowly. That's one done. Back in the courtyard, the next convict waits under a willow tree, flanked by 2 guards and an official who's clearly new. He's sweating more than the condemned. You study the man's face. He's older, lips pressed tight, but his eyes are dry. He won't cry. Some do. Some scream. Some laugh. One man once tried to quote poetry. You wrote it all down, including the part where he forgot the second line and swore quietly. The sentence is read aloud. You trace each word into the scroll with the practiced rhythm of someone who really wishes they worked in grain transport. The sun climbs higher. Your robe is heavy. Sweat prickles along your back like the ink brush is drawing on you now. After each record is completed, you must recite the final entry back to the overseeing official. It's a ritual. One wrong word, and the whole scroll is tossed. You once rewrote 3 feet of silk because you called the condemned a clerk instead of a junior scribe. You still have nightmares about it. Lunch comes in the form of a lukewarm rice ball, handed to you by a boy who clearly wishes he were delivering it to literally anyone else. You eat standing. There is no table. There is no rest. And the third execution hasn't even begun. You glance at the list. The next name is a merchant. Charge, curse the emperor's horse. Really? That's a crime now? You sigh, because yes, apparently, it is. The third man on the list is already kneeling when you arrive. His hair is disheveled, but not filthy. His robes are faded silk, which means he used to be someone, or at least pretended well. His crime, insulting the emperor's horse, sounds ridiculous. But then again, so did failing to bow deeply enough during a procession. And that one got someone executed last autumn. You remember because you accidentally wrote slightly shallow bow and had to plead your case for 2 straight hours. The merchant doesn't look frightened, just annoyed, like he's late to a meeting and the beheading is an inconvenience. When the charges are read aloud, he snorts. You're not supposed to react, but your brush hand twitches. The magistrate glares. You immediately dip the brush again, pretending you meant to flourish the character for Imperial. Very convincing. He doesn't beg. That makes things easier. You don't have to include a final plea. No need to quote a poem about justice or a sad line about his daughter's wedding. He just stares at you as you record his name, age, occupation, crime, and then, very clearly, he says, "Tell the Emperor I said it again." You pause, just for a second. You don't look up, don't meet his eyes, but your brush hesitates. There's a protocol for when the condemned says something inflammatory. It's supposed to be recorded exactly. You write it down, carefully, character by character. Then you add a footnote. Spoken in a defiant tone. That should cover you. Hopefully. And then the blade comes down. You don't watch. Not really. You look past the executioner to the trees beyond, the way the wind shakes the leaves, the way sunlight glints off the pond. You listen for the sound, though. It always comes. That short, wet punctuation, mark at the end of someone's life. You flinch. Again. You always flinch. Even after 6 years of doing this, the head rolls, the crowd gasps, then cheers. You exhale. Someone in the crowd is selling skewers. The scent of grilled duck hearts wafts over the execution grounds, mixing strangely with the iron tang in the air. You feel vaguely ill. Not because of the blood, though it's pooling near your shoes, but because you forgot to eat breakfast. Again, you hand the final scroll to the supervising eunuch, who nods perfunctorily and immediately passes it to his assistant. Nobody thanks you. Nobody ever does. Your handwriting is scrutinized, your ink consistency judged, your margins checked. But appreciation? That's for poets and fortune tellers. The executioner wipes his blade clean with a practiced flick. He nods at you. You nod back. It's not friendship. It's more like mutual understanding. You both have jobs that no one celebrates. And unlike him, you don't even get a cool nickname. He's called the Lotus Blade. You're that quiet guy with the scrolls. As you're leaving the grounds, a little girl tugs at your sleeve. She looks about 7, dirty face, barefoot. She holds up a flower, something wilted, plucked from the weeds near the latrine. You freeze. You're not supposed to engage with the public, but she just says, "Is my papa in your paper?" You nod, because lying seems crueler. She looks at the scroll tucked in your sleeve. Then she nods too, solemnly, like a tiny magistrate, and walks away. No tears, just quiet acceptance. You sit down on a nearby bench, suddenly unsure if your legs are still connected to the rest of you. You stare at the dirt, the ink on your hands, the fact that your stomach just growled. You are still hungry. Life goes on. Back at the ministry, you pass a cluster of other clerks. Some are scribes for trade contracts. Others document grain movements, marriage disputes, rainfall levels. You all wear similar robes, but only yours smell like burnt incense and moral ambiguity. One clerk smiles awkwardly at you and says, "Busy morning?" You shrug. What are you supposed to say? Yes, 3 executions and 1 haunting. Thanks for asking. Instead, you climb the narrow staircase to the archive hall. This is where your scrolls go. Not the originals, mind you. Those are sent to the palace for Imperial review, which probably means they're glanced at once and then used to wrap fish. But a copy must be archived here, permanently, in a cabinet labeled Capital Punishments. Reign of His Celestial Majesty. Year 18. You find your drawer. Open it. Dozens of rolled scrolls stare back at you like tiny corpses wrapped in bamboo ribbon. You add the day's entries. Neat, precise, sealed with wax. Labeled with your name. Every mistake here is permanent. Historians still argue whether these scrolls were ever truly objective. Did recorders sanitize the stories? Did they embellish, omit, editorialize? Some say yes, especially for noble criminals. Others claim Recorders were bound by terrifying accuracy, since a single error could be read as treasonous intent. You don't know where you fall on that spectrum. You just know you triple check every character, every comma like stroke, because you'd really prefer not to be buried next to your own typo. You return to your desk, which is technically in the hallway because the ministry ran out of offices. Your inkstone is cold. The brush tips are stiff. You clean them carefully, as though scrubbing them might erase the morning. There's a bell. Afternoon meal. You eat beside the prison accountant who explains, cheerfully, that execution costs are down 12% this quarter. You nod. Try not to imagine what that means. Fewer swords, cheaper rope, less tea for the guards. After the meal, you receive a surprise. A messenger from the Northern District hands you a folded slip. It's a copy of a scroll you wrote 2 years ago. Re-review ordered, it says. That's bad. That's very bad. It means someone, probably rich, has decided their ancestor didn't deserve to be called a tax evader. You're being summoned to revise the record, to adjust the tone, to consider alternate phrasing. You breathe deeply. Rewriting history is dangerous, but refusing, that's worse. So you prepare fresh ink. You don't even bother sighing anymore. It's not efficient. You just close your eyes, gently tap your forehead twice against the desk, an ancient bureaucratic prayer, and reach for the sealed copy of the scroll in question. The tax evader from 2 years ago. His name was Gong Wen, grain merchant, charged with hoarding, bribery, and memorably, excessive arrogance. You remember him vaguely. He wore too many rings. He smelled like sandalwood and quiet defiance. He tried to bribe the executioner, which was bold. The executioner didn't flinch. You noted it all down. Time, charge, failed bribe attempt, final words. My cousin will avenge me. It was a clean record. Apparently too clean. The palace liaison who delivered the summons didn't say much. He just cleared his throat 3 times, tapped the corner of the order with one long fingernail, and whispered, There's been reconsideration. That's court speak for. The family paid someone influential, and now history must apologize. You unroll the scroll on your desk, squinting at your own handwriting. Still neat, still exact, still dangerous if the mood in the capital has shifted. You dip your brush and carefully, very carefully, cross out excessive arrogance and replace it with misunderstood demeanor. Then bribery becomes attempted appeal. You leave hoarding alone because even the emperor has to pretend food laws matter. And you add a line. It is unclear whether the charges reflected the full context of the events. That's as vague as legally possible without just drawing a shrug emoji. Historians still argue whether execution recorders wielded soft power like this: editing scrolls, shaping perception, erasing inconvenient truths. Some suggest they were pawns. Others say they were gatekeepers of the imperial memory. You? You just hope your scroll doesn't contradict someone's family altar next week. Once your edits are complete, you reseal the scroll and return it to the archive hall. A junior clerk gives you a look, not accusatory, just tired. You nod. It's the closest thing to solidarity you're allowed. By now, the sun has started to droop, dragging shadows across the courtyard. You stretch your legs, crack your knuckles, and begin preparing for tomorrow's docket. You'd like to think you're done for the day, but Imperial justice has a flair for last-minute drama. And speak of the devil. A bell rings, not the meal bell, not the end-of-day bell. The other bell. The surprise execution. Bell, you freeze. Someone's been condemned by emergency decree. That means a messenger is already galloping across the city, scroll in hand, delivering orders from the inner court, or maybe even the emperor's own eunuch bureau. It's rare, it's fast, it's terrifying. You gather your tools, re-ink your brushes, rinse your inkstone with tea because there's no time to fetch water. You barely manage to snatch a steamed bun from the vendor across the street before a breathless boy arrives at your desk. Name, he gasps, is Ma Jintao, scholar, charged with seditious poetry. You blink. Seditious poetry, that one again. You've recorded 3 poets in the last 5 years. None of them believed their rhymes would end in execution. One of them even tried to argue that his poem was about a goose, not the empress. You remember noting, insisted goose, metaphor not intended as political satire. You follow the messenger to the holding cells behind the ministry. Ma Jintao is already seated in a bamboo cage, knees drawn up, muttering to himself. He's young, maybe 25, ink stains on every fingertip, a scroll clutched in one hand, partially burned. He looks up when you approach. Are you the one who writes it down? He asks. You nod. Then write this, he says. I regret nothing, and I hope my poem finds the emperor's ears again in the next life. You pause. Then you write it, word for word, including the bit about the next life. Your brush trembles slightly on the character for regret. It always does. It's such a difficult thing to record with honesty. His execution is rushed. Sunset looms, and there's a belief, even among rational officials, that executions after dark invite ghosts. Something about yin energy multiplying at night. So the guards drag Ma Jintao toward the courtyard, and you follow, scroll unfurling with each step like a ribbon unraveling from someone's fate. There's no crowd this time, just 2 bored soldiers, a distracted magistrate, and a goat who refuses to move from the path. The executioner doesn't even change robes. He swings without flair. The poet's head falls onto the soft grass, eyes open, mouth still forming a line of verse. Or maybe that's just your imagination. You write it down anyway. You don't seal this scroll. Not yet. You carry it back to your desk like it's heavier than your own bones. You sit, unroll it again, reread the charges, then you quietly add a line. Poem itself lost to fire. Witnesses differ on its intent. Meaning remains debated. Maybe that will help. Maybe not. You file the scroll. Take a breath. Stand. Walk. Because there's still paperwork to finish. You return to the Hall of Forms, where the final record must be transcribed twice. One for the Imperial Archive, one for public posting. The calligraphy must be crisp. The tone must be neutral. You're not allowed to include flourishes. No emotive strokes. No accidental curves that look like tears. Just fact. Just the record. Just the shape of someone's end, drawn in careful brushstrokes by a man who still doesn't know whether he's a historian or a silent accomplice. As you dip the brush again, the ink catches the candlelight and glimmers. For just a second, it looks red instead of black, but only for a second. The next morning, you wake up with ink under your nails and the lingering ghost of a poet's final words in your ears. The sun hasn't quite risen yet, but the city has. A rooster somewhere is furiously announcing his existence. You sit up on your straw mat and immediately regret it. Your back is staging a protest. Your knees crack like kindling. It's going to be one of those days. Your wife hands you a bowl of rice porridge, thinner than usual. There's tension in the house. She doesn't say anything, but you know what she's thinking. That poet, Ma Jintao, was her cousin's student. That means someone in your extended family might now think you killed him with your pen. The truth? You don't even know anymore where your brush ends and the blade begins. You nod thanks for the porridge and quietly promise yourself not to write anything involving birds, metaphors, or melancholic youths for a while. Today's docket is lighter. Only one confirmed execution so far. But don't get too comfortable. Lighter doesn't mean easier, especially when the walk to Judgment Gate is involved. You wrap your robe tightly, tuck the brush case into your sash, and step into the street. Beijing, or what will become Beijing, is already bustling. Porters grunt under sacks of grain. A donkey relieves itself right in your path, forcing you into an awkward sideways shuffle that leaves your right slipper suspiciously damp. The road to Judgment Gate is always the same: mud, noise, and just enough human tragedy to keep you grounded. Beggars line the walls, each with a story. You don't look too closely. You made that mistake last spring, locked eyes with a man missing half his face and nearly wept. Not from pity, from the realization that his name had once been on your scroll. He'd survived, or escaped, or bribed someone. The record said, executed. Your brush said he died. And yet, there he was, blinking at you through his remaining eye. Historians still argue about the integrity of imperial death records. Some claim they were absolute, each name final and binding. Others suggest clerical exceptions happened more than the empire liked to admit. You try not to pick a side. You just double check your work now. Always. Every character, every stroke, twice. Judgment Gate looms ahead, a towering arch flanked by stone lions and guards who take their job very seriously, mostly because it means they don't have to take bribes like the others. You show your badge, bowl, and step into the ministry grounds, where justice is dispensed like overcooked dumplings, slow, messy, and oddly unsatisfying. The man awaiting execution today is an official. That already complicates things. Officials don't go through the usual process. They get private justice, which sounds gentler, but actually just means more paperwork, fewer witnesses, and a significantly more nervous recorder, namely you. You're escorted to a side chamber rarely used. It smells faintly of sandalwood, ink, and career-ending mistakes. The condemned is seated on a cushion, drinking tea. Tea. Real tea, not the boiled grass you usually drink. He looks calm, too calm. His name is Lu Bao, former tax assessor of the Western provinces, accused of embezzling rice during a famine and pocketing bribe money from silk merchants. Rumors say he's also responsible for 2 missing inspectors, but that's not on the scroll. Your job isn't to speculate. Your job is to write embezzlement and ignore the whisper that says he buried someone behind a granary. He smiles when he sees you. That's never good. You're the one who records, he says. I've heard about you. You nod. Non-committal. You've heard that before. It never ends well. He leans in slightly. Just make sure you spell my name right. I'd hate to be remembered as a misprint. You almost snort. Almost. But instead, you nod again and begin. The charges are read. He doesn't flinch. The guards take him by the arms, and he rises with all the grace of a man heading to a banquet, not a beheading. But there's a delay, because today, the tools of death have arrived early. That is to say, the executioner's assistant is already waiting by the gates, polishing the sword like it's his wedding day. The blade is long, slightly curved, and shines with the kind of polish that says, I haven't touched a turnip in weeks. A new assistant, then, they always overpolish. It's like an unspoken rule. You, however, are focused on your own tools. Brushes, check. Ink, stirred, thick, not clumpy. Silk, scroll, slightly creased but usable. Jade stamp, still cool to the touch. There's a crack in the case now. You don't remember when that happened. You walk beside the prisoner as the procession begins. No crowd today, but a few curious onlookers pretend to adjust their sandals nearby. One child points and whispers, "Is that the man who stole the famine rice?" The mother yanks him away so fast you're surprised his little shoes don't fly off. At the execution ground, the atmosphere is subdued. No drums, no speeches, just a gust of wind that reminds everyone the gods are still watching. You read the charges aloud, voice flat. You've practiced this tone. It says, "I'm not here for drama. I'm here for accuracy." Lu Bao listens. He nods once, and then he says something that surprises you. "I hope someone feeds the widow in Chang'an." You blink. That wasn't part of the script. You glance at the guards. They're staring ahead. The executioner doesn't move. You have a choice. You could leave it out. No one would know. But your hand writes on instinct now. You add the line. Final words. Expressed concern for a widow in Chang'an. Maybe someone will read it, maybe not. The blade arcs. Lu Bao falls without a sound. His head rolls forward gently, like it's trying not to interrupt the silence. You seal the scroll, and just like that, it's over. The assistant bows to you, low and awkward, like he thinks it's expected. You nod, not because you respect him, but because someone has to acknowledge the weight of the moment. You return to the ministry, alone, scroll under your arm, robe now dusty from the field. You pass the same beggars, the same children, the same indifferent streets. Nothing looks different, but something feels different. Back at your desk, you pause before filing the scroll. You open it again. Trace the line about the widow. Wonder if it mattered. Then you seal it, mark the timestamp, and return it to its proper drawer. You don't speak for the rest of the afternoon. Some days the ink feels heavier than the blade. Lunch is a memory. Probably rice, possibly soup. You don't remember tasting it. Your stomach growls, but it's the type of polite growl that knows it isn't getting much more today. Instead, you sit quietly in your corner desk at the ministry, the edge of your scroll box digging gently into your ribs, reminding you that yes, another execution is already scheduled for tomorrow. But first, you have to survive today's remaining duties. The afternoon ritual is as bureaucratic as it is bizarre. The ministry requires that all execution recorders rehearse their calligraphy before filing the day's scrolls. Not because they doubt your literacy, though one misplaced brushstroke can be fatal, but because they genuinely believe in harmonious handwriting as moral reflection. You've always found that hilarious. You've written the names of 113 dead men. Some deserved it, some didn't, all in neat, morally upright cursive. You dip your brush into a fresh bowl of ink. It smells faintly of pine ash and crushed beetle. Standard issue. You unroll a blank practice scroll and write the word for justice 20 times in a row, each one slightly different. The clerk who reviews them doesn't say anything, just grunts and marks one with a tiny red dot. That's his way of saying acceptable. You once got 2 dots. You celebrate it with pickled cucumbers. Once the ink dries, it's time for the daily logbook entry. Your name, the names of the condemned, the time of death, the method, the weather, and the presence or absence of witnesses. You wonder sometimes who reads these. Do scholars pore over the margins? Do monks chant over them in some secret archive? Historians still argue whether these records serve more for truth or control. Some insist they're invaluable primary sources. Others think they were more about theater, an elaborate form of governmental reassurance. See, the machine works. Either way, the margins aren't empty, and neither are you. You're halfway through writing, the accused met death with silence, when a soft voice interrupts your trance. A recorder? You glance up. It's the intern. His name is Ping, but everyone just calls him that boy who trips on scrolls. He holds a small sealed note in both hands, his face the picture of apologetic tension. A request, he says, from the Temple of Restraint. You blink. Temples don't usually request your services. Avoid you, sure. Mutter at you in markets, definitely. But request? You take the note. The paper is high quality, the calligraphy delicate, someone with education and money. The message is brief. An execution of private nature will occur at first bell tomorrow. We request your presence for the recording. Details will be given upon arrival. Your discretion is expected. You look up. Ping is already backing away, as though proximity to that message might infect him. You tuck it into your sleeve and say nothing. That night, your walk home is unusually quiet. The city is winding down. Lanterns are lit, their soft glow bouncing off the water troughs and cobbled streets. A hawker offers you grilled chestnuts. You decline. Your appetite has taken a personal day. At home, your wife has already laid out a sleeping mat. The children are asleep. The coals in the brazier are faint but warm. You sit for a while, brush in hand, staring at the single candle beside your bedding. Eventually, you write, not an official scroll, just lines, sentences with no direction. Today, a man died and gave his last thoughts to a woman no one knows. I wonder if geese grieve their own reflections. My brush hand feels heavier than ever. You hide the page, fold it into the bottom of your drawer, under the old tea receipts, and the ink orders, and the funeral notice for your uncle. Sleep is a tug of war. You drift in and out of dreams, each one soaked in ink, and whispering names you've written and rewritten so many times, they've become a chant. When the rooster calls again, you wake not with dread, but with curiosity, because the Temple of Restraint doesn't request execution recorders. They hide from them. You eat a quick breakfast, more millet, and head out before the city fully stirs. The temple sits east of the river, behind a thicket of whispering pines and a gate carved with ancient characters that mean both truth and punishment, depending on the reader's guilt level. You're met at the entrance by a monk in gray robes. His expression is unreadable, not cold, not warm, just still. You're early, he says. So is the execution, you reply. He almost smiles. You're led through a narrow corridor lit by skylight and silence. At the far end is a small garden, enclosed on all sides by walls of bamboo and scripture. In the center, a chair, simple, wooden, clean. Seated in that chair is a woman. She's older, not elderly, but seasoned. Her hands rest calmly in her lap. Her gaze is fixed on a koi pond to her left, as though the fish are performing a private opera. She doesn't flinch when she sees you. In fact, she nods. You're the recorder? She asks. You nod back. I requested you. That makes your fingers tingle in a bad way. I've already written my confession, she continues. You'll find it in the scroll beside the altar. She gestures to a table nearby. There's a scroll, sealed in wax, beside a cup of tea and a small dish of candied ginger. The setup looks more like a poetry reading than an execution. She is accused of regicide, the monk murmurs beside you. Attempted poisoning, You blink. That's not a small accusation. And this is being handled here? The Emperor allows certain dignitaries their preferences. Of course he does. The woman speaks again. I don't need to be remembered as innocent, but I would like to be remembered as coherent. You open your scroll, dip your brush, begin to write. She kneels. There is no blade this time. No crowd, no spectacle. She drinks from a small cup, clear liquid, slightly amber, and closes her eyes. Her body slumps forward with the grace of a leaf falling onto water. The monk steps forward, places 2 coins on her eyes. You finish writing. No one says a word. The temple bell rings, and you head back through the corridor, wondering why this death feels cleaner, almost kind. You do not file this scroll with the others. You store it in a private drawer marked unsorted. It's not an official category, but sometimes history needs a gray area. The next day feels hollow. You wake up before the rooster, which is almost offensive. There's a kind of sacred pact between man and rooster, and you've just broken it. But sleep had other plans. Or rather, it didn't. Your dreams were riddled with fish swimming in teacups, gray robed monks reciting verdicts and riddles, and the woman. What was her name? It wasn't on the scroll. That's what haunts you most. A life summed up by tea, poison, and perfect posture. No name, just accused of regicide. At breakfast, your wife notices your silence. She doesn't ask questions. She just slides the bowl closer and gives you a second portion of pickled radish, which, in your household, is basically a love poem. You walk to the ministry slower than usual. The streets are damp from a midnight drizzle. Puddles shimmer in the dawn light. You pass the tofu vendor, who is swatting flies like he's training for war, and the scholar with the squeaky cart of scrolls that no one reads anymore. You make it through the red gates and up to your hallway desk without speaking a word. Your ink is already dry from yesterday. Your brushes are sulking in their little box. The jade stamp sits off center, as though someone borrowed it during the night and forgot to put it back straight. You adjust it. Today's docket is already lying on your desk. 5 names. You blink at the scroll. 5. That's high. You check the date again. Not a festival. Not a purge day. Just a regular, quiet, deeply uncomfortable Tuesday. The list includes 3 commoners: a thief, a deserter, and a man who insulted a noble during a banquet, which probably means he coughed during the wrong toast. But the last 2 names give you pause. One is a palace eunuch. The other is a mid-level archivist. You reread the second one twice. Archivists aren't supposed to do anything, let alone get executed for it. There's no explanation, just his name, age, department, and a notation that reads breach of protocol, internal record falsification. You blink again. You know this man, or at least you've passed him in the Hall of Records. He's the one who hums tunelessly while rolling scrolls, always misaligned, always slightly lopsided. He once spilled ink on your robe and bowed 8 times to apologize. You remember thinking, no one that clumsy survives long here. Apparently you were right. You file the docket away and begin preparations. By mid-morning, the courtyard buzzes like a kicked beehive. 5 executions draw a crowd. People don't say it aloud, but some days feel like market festivals. If your idea of a good time includes the occasional public decapitation and some slightly overcooked noodles. The execution ground is already muddy. A small platform has been erected for better viewing. The irony is palpable. You're handed a new inkstone by a trembling apprentice who clearly drew the short straw. You thank him gently, mostly because he looks like he might faint. The first 3 executions pass in a blur. The thief sobs. The deserter trembles. The banquet insulter mutters something that sounds suspiciously like a haiku about soup. You record them all. Charges, names, deaths, done. And then it's time for the eunuch. He's young, very young, face smooth, eyes wide, hands fidgeting, even with shackles on. He says nothing, just looks around like he's hoping someone, anyone, will stop this. No one does. That someone isn't coming. His charge is vague. Betrayal of imperial confidence. You know what that usually means. He saw something, or said something, or delivered the wrong letter to the wrong set of hands. In court life, proximity to power is a permanent risk factor. You write the charge. You add execution by sword. You note the time, the weather, the presence of noble observers. And then he looks at you, really looks. Does anyone read these? He asks, voice shaking. You pause. I don't know, you say honestly. And then the blade falls. No last words. No poetic flair. Just silence and mud. The fifth man is the archivist. He's not trembling. He's angry. You can tell from the way he walks. Defiantly, chin up, eyes sharp. He's not here to die quietly. He sees you and narrows his eyes. You know why I'm here, he snaps, don't you? You don't. Not exactly. I recorded something that didn't match the palace version. They told me to revise it. I refused. Your stomach sinks. Now you understand. He was caught in the same trap that's always waiting for people like you. People who handle the past. He leans closer, voice low but firm. Write this, recorder. I chose truth. The executioner hesitates. The magistrate hesitates. You don't. You write it down. Final words, I chose truth. The blade is slower this time. You wonder if the executioner did that on purpose. The head rolls. The silence deepens. The crowd doesn't cheer this time. Maybe they didn't understand. Or maybe they did. Back at the ministry, the air is thick with something you can't quite name. Not incense. Not fear. Something like conscience. Or maybe just dust. You file the scrolls carefully. You double check every character. You seal them with shaking hands. Your supervisor nods and says, efficient work. You smile faintly. Inside, something is cracking. You step outside just as the sun begins to set. The sky is pale gold. A crane flies overhead. You wonder if it knows how many names you've written today. You wonder if it cares. You don't go straight home. Your feet take you somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. A place that smells less like policy and more like pine needles and old forgotten incense. You find yourself wandering the back alleys behind the ministry, past the noodle stall, where you once saw a magistrate cry into his bowl, and into the shade of the scholar's garden. It's not much. A few crooked trees, a stone bench with a crack down the middle, and a koi pond with exactly 3 fish. One bright, one dull, and one who seems undecided. You sit, you breathe, and for the first time in weeks, you let your mind go where it's not supposed to the list. Your list, the private one, the mental ledger of faces you remember, words you couldn't forget, moments that ink alone couldn't capture. Lu Bao, who asked about a widow. Ma Jintao, who wrote poetry to the end. The woman at the temple, who never gave her name. And today, 2 more. The eunuch with eyes full of questions, and the archivist who chose truth. You think about how you recorded their final words, how you stamped the scrolls, how you kept your hand steady even when your heart wasn't. You once thought this job was about writing things down, preserving facts, building an archive of justice. Now you're not so sure. Historians still argue over the role of death records in Imperial China. Were they impartial transcripts, propaganda tools, or simply expensive performance art? For an empire obsessed with appearing orderly? The answer probably is yes. You rise from the bench and head home as the sky darkens. At the door, your wife greets you with a look, not one of alarm or worry, but something softer. She gestures to the corner where a small bowl of sweet potatoes is waiting, still warm. You sit, you eat, neither of you speaks. Your daughter climbs into your lap, clutching a ragged doll with one button eye. She looks at your hands. Why are your fingers black? You look down. Ink stains again. You smile. I write things. You say simply. She nods. That makes perfect sense to her. You tuck her in later, adjusting the blanket just so. She whispers a song in her half sleep, something about a dragon who loses its tail and finds a friend instead. You pause at the door, listen a little longer. When you return to your desk, you unroll a blank piece of parchment. Not for the ministry, not for the archive. For you. You start to write. Not the names, not the crimes, the truths between them, like how some people die with dignity, how others die confused, how some die for petty reasons and some for nothing at all, how sometimes even the executioner flinches. You don't know what to do with this scroll. You can't file it. You can't burn it. So you hide it, again, in your drawer of forbidden truths, folded between rice receipts and bad poetry. The next morning, the rooster crows. As always. You rise. As always. But today is a posting day. Every 5 days, one execution is chosen for public display. Not the body, just the words. The official record, sealed with a red ribbon, posted on the bulletin wall, beside the temple of administration for all to see. It's part justice, part theater, and entirely about control. Guess who gets to write it? You do. You choose the archivist's scroll. You clean your best brush. The sable one with the ivory handle. The one you rarely use because it writes too beautifully. You grind fresh ink, slow and rhythmic, until the stone hums with that low, comforting rasp. Then, with precise care, you write the public record. Lumin, archivist of the Ninth Hall, was executed for breach of protocol. His final words were, I chose truth. You pause. You want to write more. About the silence, the weight of the air, the way his words echoed in your chest, like a bell made of regret. But you don't, because someone might read it, and someone might notice, and someone might decide that you chose truth too. Instead, you dry the scroll, you seal it, you pass it to the messenger, and then you sit. You stare at the wall, and you wait. By mid-morning, it's already up. Crowds gather. Some read in silence. Some scoff. One man mutters, Truth? Foolish thing to die for. Another whispers, I knew Lumin. He used to bring ginger candy to the scribes. You hover near the back, hood up, pretending to browse the adjacent scrolls about grain taxes, and bridge repairs. You watch the crowd thin, and then, as the last rays of morning sun hit the parchment, a boy, barely 12, walks up to the wall. He reads the scroll. He mouths the words. Then he steps back, bows slightly, and walks away. You don't know who he is, but you remember his face, because someone did read it, and that somehow is enough for today. You return to the ministry, shoulders a little less hunched than usual. Just a little. Like you've placed one pebble back where it belongs on a collapsing wall. Of course, there are still 1,000 more loose stones, but for a moment, the whole thing doesn't seem like it's about to cave in. The clerk at the entrance barely glances at you. He's engrossed in a heated debate with another official about whether silkworm production should be taxed per worm or per cocoon. You nod politely, not because you care, but because you're terrified they'll ask your opinion. You've made that mistake once before, and that's how you accidentally ended up recording 3 months of horse inspection reports. Back at your desk, you're greeted by a small surprise, a package, wrapped in yellow cloth. No seal, no note. Suspicious? Yes. But in your line of work, if someone wanted you dead, they probably wouldn't gift wrap it. You open it carefully. Inside, a brush. Not a standard issue one. This one has a lacquered bamboo handle inlaid with a red thread pattern, the kind only nobles or serious calligraphers use. It's balanced, light, exquisitely made. A small tag is tied to it, for hands that record more than ink. A friend. You blink, then laugh quietly, just a puff of air through your nose. It's probably a prank, or maybe someone trying to curry favor, but it's also nice. You tuck it into your sleeve. You'll use it when the day doesn't feel quite so sharp around the edges. Of course, this day has other plans. You've just settled in when the summons arrives. An urgent scroll, hand delivered, red string tied 3 times. You don't even open it right away. That triple tie means one thing: direct palace involvement. And direct palace involvement usually means your brush is about to become very, very dangerous. The scroll is short. The recorder is required at the Northern District Execution Grounds. Incident with foreign envoy. Confidentiality expected. Immediate departure. You groan, which is maybe not the most professional response, but you're alone, so it doesn't count. You gather your things again. The road to the Northern District is longer, windier, and decidedly smellier. You pass a dung cart that's seen better days and a flock of chickens aggressively debating a dropped rice cake. It's all very dignified. The execution grounds here are smaller, more private, used mostly for quiet incidents, the kind that shouldn't appear in court records, but must still be recorded somewhere. You arrive to find a curious scene. No crowd, no officials, just a handful of palace guards and a very nervous-looking scribe who gestures you forward like you're the answer to a prayer and a stomachache all at once. The condemned? A foreigner, not a barbarian, not some wild nomad, but a merchant from the West. Silk Road, most likely. His clothes are dust covered, but expensive. His beard is neatly trimmed. His wrists are bound with a red cord, which means sensitive case. You're handed a pre-written charge slip. It reads, violation of diplomatic conduct, attempted bribery, disrespect to court, which is the Imperial way of saying, we don't like what he said, but we're not going to explain it. The merchant doesn't flinch when he sees you. In fact, he smiles. Ah, the recorder, he says in accented but perfectly intelligible Chinese. You write the truth, yes? You hesitate. I write what I'm ordered to write. He nods, as if that was the answer he expected. He leans slightly toward you and murmurs, then record this. Your empire has beautiful scrolls, but a poor sense of humor. You raise an eyebrow. That's your final statement? No, he says. That's just a compliment. And then he's led away. The execution is quick, efficient. Too efficient, in fact. There's an edge to it. You've been doing this long enough to recognize when a beheading is meant more as a warning to someone else. You dip your brush. You write, executed by Imperial decree. Charges as stated. Final words, your empire has beautiful scrolls, but a poor sense of humor. You pause. You could soften that. Reword it. Swap humor for honor, maybe. Less inflammatory. But you don't. You write it straight. Later, back at the ministry, your supervisor squints at the scroll. He reads the line again, then again. Then he sighs and stamps it. Be careful, he says. Truth makes poor company in a tight room. You nod and file it anyway. That night, Your wife pours you tea before you even sit down. She doesn't ask about the foreigner, but she does say something rare. I heard someone say your name today. You pause mid sip. They said the recorder wrote something brave. You set the cup down slowly and smile, a small one, the kind that lives at the back of your throat and only comes out when the house is quiet. The night is soft, and the ink on your hands doesn't feel like guilt. Morning greets you with the delicate sound of your neighbor's rooster attempting opera, a little flat, a little too ambitious, but deeply committed. You rise before the second crow and stretch your limbs like someone trying to coax dignity out of sore joints. No official docket awaits you today, not yet. That should be good news. But in your line of work, silence is rarely a gift. It's more like a thunderhead, waiting politely outside the door. You arrive at the ministry earlier than usual. The outer corridor is still dark. The guards nod in sleepy rhythm. A street sweeper sings a tune with no melody. You unlock your cabinet, roll out your inkstone, and just sit for a moment, watching the sunlight slowly creep across the bamboo floorboards. That's when they arrive. Three men, gray robes, imperial seals on their sashes, the kind of men whose names you never know, but whose glances feel like cold soup poured down your back. They don't bow, they don't smile. You are to accompany us, one says. To where? No answer. Just a flick of the hand. You follow. You are led not to an execution ground, nor a courtroom, but to the Forbidden Records Vault, an ironically named archive that few are allowed to enter, and even fewer are allowed to speak about. You've only heard rumors that it houses imperial secrets, that it contains scrolls written in blood, that once an archivist got trapped inside for 3 days and came out speaking in tangents and bird sounds. The vault is beneath the ministry, past a hidden door, down a narrow stairwell that smells like wet stone and regret. At the entrance, one guard unlocks a large metal clasp. Another recites a short verse, something old, something about balance and fate. You wonder if that's standard procedure or just superstition. Inside, the air is cool and heavy. The walls are lined with scroll cubbies that stretch far above your head. Some are labeled in characters so old they might as well be riddles. A man sits at a lone table under a dim oil lamp. His robe is darker than yours. His belt is red, judicial rank. High, very high. He gestures for you to sit. You do. No words are exchanged for a long while. Just the sound of the lamp hissing and your heart practicing drum solos. Finally, he speaks. We've reviewed your scrolls. That sentence alone makes your spine attempt escape. Your handwriting is precise. Your margins are clean. Your timestamps are consistent. But, the but. You include too much. You frown. Too much? He slides forward one of your scrolls. The foreigner. Beautiful scrolls, but a poor sense of humor. You nod. Was that necessary? It's what he said. Yes, but why keep it in? You consider lying, but instead you say, because if someone's last words are forgotten, it's like they never existed at all. He stares at you, not angry, not impressed, just processing. Historians still argue whether the execution recorder was merely a tool of state or a subtle force for preservation. Some believe recorders were the last chance a person had to be remembered honestly. Others say that's sentimental nonsense, that a recorder's role was strictly clerical. You suspect this man belongs to the second group. He doesn't respond, just produces another scroll. This one you don't recognize. Not exactly, but then you do. It's one of your edits. A revised version of an old scroll. The salt smuggler, maybe? No, this one's older. A rice hoarder, executed during the drought 5 summers ago. The scroll in front of you contains a red annotation in the margins. Tone deviates from state version. You suddenly feel very warm, despite the cold of the vault. The man leans forward. You're not being punished, he says, but you are being watched. That doesn't make you feel better. You may return to your duties. You stand, bow, leave the room with the grace of someone trying not to look like they're fleeing. Back upstairs, the sun is too bright. Everything smells like overcooked tea leaves and undercooked suspicion. You sit at your desk, stare at the blank page, and try to write the word for balance. You mess it up twice. That afternoon, a single scroll arrives. Not an execution docket, a request. An audience with a magistrate, a personal one. That's new? You arrive at his private chambers just after the incense is lit. He's old, thin. His beard is wispy and long enough to qualify as a safety hazard. You wrote my brother's execution scroll, he says. Your blood turns politely to slush. He waves his hand. I'm not angry. I just wanted to see the face of the man who recorded it. You bow. He sips tea. I hated my brother, he says plainly, but he was funny. He told a joke before they killed him. Did you record it? You search your memory. It comes back. Something about a rooster, a tax collector, and a mule. You nod. I wrote final words, attempted humor, content unclear. He laughs, a dry wheeze, but honest. Fair enough, he says. At least someone heard it. You leave oddly lighter. Even in this job, occasionally, something lands where it's meant. That night you sharpen your brushes. You clean your stamp. You refill your ink because being watched doesn't mean you stop. It just means you get better at not blinking. The rain starts sometime around midnight. You hear it tapping on the roof like a lazy musician keeping tempo. It's soft at first, then builds into a full orchestra by dawn. Drums on the tiles, cymbals in the gutters, flutes in the bamboo. You consider staying in bed. Just this once. But no, execution waits for no one, not even the weather. You pull your robe tighter, wrap your feet in waxed cloth, and slosh your way to the ministry, like a particularly resigned duck. The streets are empty save for vendors trying to keep steam rising from their carts, and city dogs who clearly gave up on staying dry hours ago. At your desk, there's already a scroll. Today's docket is short, one name, but the detail that catches your eye isn't the crime or even the rank, it's the time. Midnight execution. That's not standard. That's not even legal, under most circumstances. You reread it twice, just to be sure. Midnight. Palace grounds. Private Imperial order. Do not delay. You sit back and try to remember the last time someone was executed at midnight. Oh, right. You were 15. It was whispered about for weeks. Something involving a concubine, a jade hairpin, and an incident too scandalous to survive daylight. You fetch your best travel ink and a tightly rolled silk scroll, the special ones. The I might be writing something imperial tonight ones. The day passes in slow motion. You complete two smaller records, petty thefts, a grain misweighing scandal, one disgraced monk who allegedly taught a goat to gamble. Nothing that requires flair. You return home in the late afternoon to rest. Your wife raises an eyebrow when you tell her you'll be going back out. She doesn't ask why. She just makes sure you eat a warm bowl of noodles first. She slips a little ginger into the broth for steadiness. Night falls. You head to the palace. It's quiet. The kind of quiet that feels rehearsed. You're met at the back gate by a man in red. Not crimson like the outer guard. Red. Special red. We don't have names. Red. He doesn't speak, just gestures. You follow. You're led through a maze of corridors, lit only by oil lamps in bowls of water. The light flickers against walls decorated with imperial edicts and impossible silkwork. You pass through three gates, down two steps, and into a courtyard that smells like wet pine, incense, and expensive consequences. There's a platform, not a stage, a platform. In the center, a single figure kneeling. You can't see the face. The hood is too large, but the posture is upright, proud even. The executioner is already in place, his sword wrapped in black cloth until the final moment. You're handed the sealed scroll. It's thin. The name is there. You freeze because you know that name. Minister Han, the Minister of Rights, the man who once praised your handwriting, the man who requested your copy of the mourning decree last year, the man who once told you over tea and dried plum that a well drawn character is a moral act. He's kneeling, and no one is saying why. There's no crime listed, just by imperial order, midnight. You glance at the guards. No one meets your eyes. You dip your brush. You write. Name, rank, order, method. You reach the line for final words. Unsure if any will come. They do. He turns slightly, not to you, toward the sky, and he says softly, "Let the ink outlive the silence." Then he straightens and bows. The blade is drawn. There is no drum, no chant, no pronouncement. Just the hiss of silk as the cloth falls away. Then silence. Then nothing. You close the scroll slowly. You don't dry the ink. You let it blur slightly, just enough to make the word silence look like it's slipping off the page. As you're escorted back through the palace halls, you notice something. The lamps are being extinguished behind you, one by one. The silence follows. Back at your desk, you seal the scroll with a piece of wax pressed from a special stamp you've never used before. It leaves the mark of the imperial cypress tree, not for archives, not for public record. This scroll will vanish, locked in a vault, never read again. Maybe. Historians still argue whether midnight executions in the Forbidden City were real or ritual, whether they were symbolic purges, political resets, or simply performed for the satisfaction of secrecy. No records exist publicly, no names confirmed, only whispers. But you wrote one, and somewhere, in a drawer only opened under threat of thunder, it exists. You go home as dawn breaks. Your wife is asleep, the coal's nearly out. You sit beside her, ink still on your fingers, and whisper into the cold, "Let the ink outlive the silence." The ministry is unusually quiet the next morning. Not the calm kind of quiet, like a nap after rice wine. The brittle kind, like porcelain that hasn't cracked yet, but knows it will. The clerks speak in whispers. The scroll runners move like ghosts. Even the always angry archivist doesn't slam his drawers today. You take your usual seat, straighten your robe, and notice that someone's already left you today's docket. It's blank? Well, not quite. There's one name, a boy, age 16. No crime listed. Just 3 words. Awaiting classification. Proceed. You stare at it, trying to make sense of the phrasing. Classification? That's not something your department handles. That's Ministry of Justice vocabulary. Or maybe something from the inner court's messier file cabinets. Not yours. You ask a fellow recorder, one of the older ones, if he's seen language like this before. He nods grimly. Means they haven't decided what to call it yet. But they're going to kill him anyway. He says it so flatly that you almost miss the horror of the sentence. You copy the name onto your scroll preparation sheet. You dip your brush. You hesitate. Should I leave the crime line blank? The old recorder shrugs. Use the euphemism, he says. Unlawful presence. It's vague enough to avoid revision later. You hate how well that makes sense. By late morning, you've been summoned to the holding ground, not a formal execution courtyard, just a fenced in area near the ministry kitchens. It smells like boiled cabbage and damp bricks. Not the sort of place to die. Then again, what is? The boy is small, really small, like someone forgot to water him. He's not crying, he's humming. You recognize the tune, an old folk song about a fox who borrows feathers from birds to fly. It ends with the fox falling into a river, betrayed by his own ambition. It's a lullaby. And also, depending on the dynasty, considered subversive. You ask the guard, why is he here? The guard shrugs. Wandered into the palace stables. Some court lady panicked. Thought he was an assassin. You blink. Was he armed? Just a flute. You stare at the boy. His hands are bound in front of him, but loosely. He could run. He's not trying. You dip your brush. You write, name, Chi Lien, age, 16, occupation, unknown charge, unlawful presence in palace grounds, tool in possession, wooden flute. Remarks, no resistance. Humming. He glances at you. You're the writer, he says. Do you get tired of writing names? You pause. Sometimes. My father used to write songs, he says. He said ink can carry music. Do you think that's true? You want to say yes. You really do. But your throat closes around the word. You nod instead. The magistrate appears, young, nervous, possibly promoted for reasons other than competence. He reads the charge aloud, awkwardly, as if he knows it's nonsense. Keelan doesn't flinch. The magistrate asks if he has any final words. The boy grins. Yes, I hope your horse has fleas. The magistrate flushes. The guard chuckles under his breath. You write it down, not because it's important, because it's his. The blade comes too fast, as if the executioner was hoping to get it over with before anyone realized how wrong it all was. There is no crowd. There is no record beyond yours. You roll the scroll slowly. The paper feels too fragile for the truth it holds. Later, back at your desk, you don't file it with the others. You hesitate, and then you reach for the unsorted drawer, the same one that holds the woman from the temple, the archivist who chose truth, and a handful of other scrolls whose names don't sit well with the shelves. You slide it in, gently. Historians still argue whether the record of Chilean ever existed. No official mentions, no state acknowledgement. But a few secret poems mention a fox with a flute who walked into a lion's den and made someone laugh before dying. Some say it's metaphor. You know better. You wrote the laugh. You marked the note. That evening, you take a detour on your way home. There's a stall near the river that sells carved flutes, mostly for children, but some are finely made. The old man behind the counter doesn't ask questions. You buy one, and as you walk home, you hum just a little, just enough for the ink to remember. The next day begins like every other, with too little sleep, a mild toothache you've been ignoring for 4 months, and the smell of overcooked millet porridge hanging in the kitchen like regret. You chew slowly, wondering if today will bring anything new. It does, sort of. A messenger arrives before you can even finish breakfast. Young, sweaty, clutching a scroll like it might explode. He doesn't even knock, just stands outside your door, staring at you through the wood. You open it. He says nothing, just hands you the scroll and runs. You don't like that. People running after handing you scrolls is how coups start, or how you end up spending the rest of your life writing about crimes that didn't happen. You unroll the scroll carefully. One name, a noble's son, charged with coordinated disrespect during a state banquet. You blink. Coordinated? That's a new one. Apparently, he made a joke during the toast, and it was funny. Unfortunately, it was also at the expense of a senior general's eyebrows and the empress's taste in furniture. Neither appreciated the humor. The son was promptly arrested for eroding decorum. The execution is scheduled for this afternoon. Fast, even for your standards. You arrive at the courtyard in a foul mood and soggy shoes. The air is thick with humidity and scandal. Everyone knows who this boy is. Zhao Jin, son of Zhao Wu, Minister of Appointments. You met Zhao Wu once at a festival. He had a beard that looked like it belonged to someone else, and the voice of a man used to having people agree with him. Xiao Jin, however, does not share his father's seriousness. He greets you from the holding area with a grin. You must be the famous recorder, he says. I hope you make me sound taller. You pause. You're about to be executed. Yes, he says brightly, but it's for satire. That's practically an honor. You blink again. You do that a lot around men like this. Zhao Jin is shackled but loose-limbed, like a man lounging at a tea house. You wonder what he said at the banquet. You wonder if it was worth dying for. The official record states, accused, Zhao Jin charge, coordinated disrespect, method, public execution, witnesses, 8 magistrates, 12 guards, 1 court scribe. You write it all down. Then you ask, because sometimes you have to know, what did you say? He smirks. I said the Empress's new screen looked like it was made by a blind chicken with a silk addiction. You cough, loudly, into your sleeve. That's vivid. She did ask for feedback. You nod slowly, recording his words in your unofficial scroll, the one you'll lock away later, the one with the truth, not just the facts. Chaojin stretches his neck. Could you make sure my final words are legible? I'll do my best. The crowd is smaller than you'd expect, maybe because nobody wants to be seen enjoying this, maybe because the weather has decided that today should be sticky, hot, and faintly threatening. Thunder murmurs somewhere in the distance, like a relative who isn't quite ready to leave the party. The executioner looks uncomfortable, possibly because he once served under Zhao Wu. You can tell by the way he refuses to make eye contact with the condemned. Zhao Jin doesn't flinch. He bows dramatically and shouts, I regret nothing but my haircut. The blade falls. Too fast. No one laughs, but you do write it down. Back at the ministry, your supervisor reads your draft with a furrowed brow. These were his final words? You nod. And they were sincere? You shrug. They were his. The supervisor grunts. I suppose we'll allow it. You seal the scroll. Then, without permission, you open your private drawer. You add Zhao Jin's name to the list. You write, spoke like a jester, died like a prince. You don't know if anyone will ever read it, but it felt important to record. Historians still argue whether satire ever truly threatened power in Imperial China. Some believe it was a release valve, a way for citizens to blow off steam without changing anything. Others argue it was treated more seriously than treason. A clever joke could start a revolution faster than a poorly armed militia. You don't know the answer, but you do know this. Chao Jin died smiling. And that's rare. That evening, you find yourself lingering outside the silk merchant's shop. There, displayed prominently, is a screen, not unlike the one described. It is in fact quite terrible. You chuckle, quietly, just enough for the ink to remember. There are days when your work feels like ink spilled onto silk, permanent, delicate, and impossible to explain to anyone who hasn't had to write a man's last words before breakfast. Today is not one of those days. Today feels like stamp day, because today you get to use the execution stamp, not your jade personal seal, the one you carry tucked in your sleeve. No, this is the stamp. Capital T, capital S. The one that sits in a locked case at the ministry, surrounded by old superstition, red tape, and an unspoken sense that it might grow fangs if left unattended. You're handed the key after verifying your scrolls from the last week. 5 names, all confirmed. No further inquiries. That's rare. You walk to the seal room, a quiet chamber that smells like camphor wood, melted wax, and the kind of fear that doesn't raise its voice. Inside the case is a squat block of dark green jade, carved centuries ago. The handle is a dragon wrapped around a square base, eyes too detailed for comfort. The stamping face holds 4 characters. Execution confirmed by Imperial order. That's it. And yet, it's heavy in the hand. Not physically, emotionally, cosmically. Like it knows what it represents. You line up the scrolls, one by one. Dip the face in cinnabar paste. Press. A pause. A breath. And then the thump of impact. The faint crackle of wet paste soaking into silk. Again. Thump. Again. Thump. The room fills with the smell of iron and dust and judgment. You hesitate on the 5th scroll. Chilean. The boy with the flute. You're not supposed to stamp these unless everything aligns. Charge, method, witness signature, time. His scroll has those things, technically. But you also know none of them mean anything. You check the box labeled Official Review, still blank. You glance over your shoulder, no one there. You take the scroll. And instead of the stamp, you fold it into the alternate log, the one for delayed entries. It's a formality usually reserved for disputed executions, or ones with clerical delays. You'll take the risk. It buys time. Maybe nothing more, but even paper deserves a chance to breathe before it's buried. You lock the stamp away again, wiping the jade clean with a silk cloth that smells faintly of mold and regret. Later, your supervisor reviews the stamped scrolls. Where's the 5th? You answer evenly. The witness line was incomplete. He nods. Doesn't check. Stamping day fatigue. You quietly exhale relief and return to your desk. But the quiet doesn't last, because that evening, long after most have left, a eunuch arrives at your door. Not a page, not a clerk, an actual palace eunuch, dressed in plum silk, eyebrows threaded to within an inch of existence, and a scroll case strapped to his belt like a dagger. He bows just slightly. Official transmission from the inner chamber, he says. You stand, bow deeply, accept the scroll. He does not wait for acknowledgement, just turns and leaves, robes whispering behind him like conspiracy. You open the scroll with care. It's short, effective immediately. Execution scrolls of state interest shall be sealed with secondary imprint. New stamp enclosed. Do not duplicate. Return old. You read it again, then again. Your heart thuds like the jade block itself. They're changing the stamp, and that only happens for one reason. The old one has lost control. You're handed the new stamp in a separate case. This one is smaller, lighter. Still jade, but lighter in color. The dragon has been replaced with a phoenix. Less ferocious, more symbolic. But the base still holds power. 4 new characters. Righteous closure, sealed. You stare at it. Righteous, closure, sealed. The language has shifted. No longer about order, now about optics. Historians still debate when the empire began caring more about appearances than intentions. Some say it was always that way. Others point to this moment, the bureaucratic rebranding of death, as the true turning point. You don't know what to think. You lock the old stamp in its return box. You stare at the new one for a long time. Then you test it on a blank scroll just to see the shape. Thump. It's neater, more elegant, more palatable. You hate it immediately. But also, inevitably, You know it's the future. That night, you sit on your roof for the first time in years. Your wife brings you tea, says nothing, and joins you. The city breathes below. Lanterns flicker. Dogs bark. Somewhere, someone plays a flute out of tune. You sip your tea and quietly mourn a dragon shaped piece of jade. The next morning arrives like a whisper instead of a trumpet. Rain has stopped. The air is clean, too clean. The kind of clean that smells like soap on a borrowed robe. Nice, but not yours. You arrive at the ministry early, brushing past two magistrates deep in an argument about bridge tolls and divine punishment. One of them sees you, stops mid sentence, and nods. You nod back. Everyone's a little more polite around a man who writes history in blood and ink. At your desk, no docket, no scroll, just a single folded note. Report to Department of Harmony. Quietly, you exhale. Department of Harmony. The name alone is a masterpiece of misdirection. They don't manage music or art, they manage people, whispers, letters, secrets. If someone disappears without a record, Harmony probably balanced them. You follow the long corridor down to the Harmony Wing, a place that always smells faintly of plum blossom and overboiled strategy. You're greeted by a clerk who speaks in the rhythm of someone rehearsed and slightly terrified. This way, the room is small. One window, one chair, one man behind a desk with fingers too long and nails too clean. You're the execution recorder, he says without looking up. I am. He slides forward a scroll. Thin, too thin. Today's case, he says. No public record required. You scan the name. It's your former mentor, senior scribe Wen. Retired 3 years ago. Taught you how to hold a brush, how to trim a scroll, how to disguise a correction as an artistic flourish. You hadn't seen him since his farewell tea ceremony, where he spilled half a cup on his own foot and declared it an omen of leisure. You stare at the name, then up at the Harmony agent. There must be a mistake. There's not. Charges? Unauthorized commentary. You wait. He clarifies, though not helpfully. He made notes in the margins. You feel your hands tremble slightly, not out of shock, out of familiarity, because you've done that too, he continues. The notes were found on drafts of the morning edict for the Empress's cousin. They included unflattering observations. Like what? The agent tilts his head. One read, a man so dull he could bore a funeral procession into turning back. You blink? Then, against your better judgment, you laugh. Quietly, but not quietly enough. The agent raises one eyebrow. You compose yourself. When? Sunset. Private courtyard. You will be the only witness, and the only record. He hands you a pouch. Inside, the new stamp, the phoenix. You return to your desk. You sit and stare at your empty scroll. The idea of writing his name, when the man who once told you that writing was like breathing through your fingers, feels like swallowing sand, but you do it slowly. You prepare the scroll, even though your body is resisting every stroke. You grind the ink like it's a confession, and at sunset, you walk through the side gate into a garden that smells like damp stone and pine needles. He's already there. When? Sitting, calm, cross-legged, as if waiting for tea, not death. You look older, he says warmly. So do you, you reply. He smiles. The job will do that. You sit beside him, though you're not supposed to. You really wrote that note? Oh yes, he says proudly. He earned it. You both chuckle. The guards are distant, respectful almost, like they don't want to be part of this either. Do you want to say anything official? You ask gently. Wen thinks. Then, yes. Write this. Final words. May the margins outlive the message. You nod. You dip your brush, and as you write, the blade arcs. It's clean. No hesitation. No pain. Only the echo of ink. You seal the scroll with the phoenix stamp. It feels wrong. Feathery. Decorative. Wynne would have mocked it. You slide the scroll into your sleeve, and instead of returning to the ministry, you walk home. Straight home. You light a lantern. You place the scroll beside your teacup, and you write another scroll. A second one that won't be filed. One that simply says, how Wynne taught me how to breathe through my fingers. He believed in truth with a smirk. He died for a joke, but it was a good one. You don't seal this one. You don't file it. You fold it and slide it under your sleeping mat. Some truths need to lie down beside you for a while. Historians still argue whether marginalia in court documents carried real weight. Some say it was harmless scribble. Others believe it shaped policy behind closed doors, that those side notes nudged emperors and shaped reputations. But you know one thing for certain, it could kill you. You close your eyes that night with ink still drying beside your bed, and you dream of margins that never end. Morning drips in slowly, like cold tea through a cracked lid. You rise without prompting, body already prepped for the routine. Wash, dress, prepare brushes, chew yesterday's stale rice with quiet commitment. At your desk, the usual ink blot greets you like an old, resentful friend. You run your thumb over it, same spot as always. You'd clean it, but at this point, it feels like company. There's no docket, instead, a summons, again. But this time, not from Harmony, not from the Ministry of Justice. This one bears the mark of the Imperial Artisans Bureau. You blink at the seal. This department rarely deals in death. They oversee silk design, garden planning, ceremonial fans. You once saw them reject a tapestry for being too emotionally blue. Still, a scroll is a scroll. You go. The bureau is unsurprisingly beautiful. Fragrant wood, paintings on the ceiling, the faint tinkling of wind chimes. For a moment, you forget why you're here. You half expect someone to hand you a lotus blossom and ask about your opinion on embroidery patterns. Instead, you're escorted into a low room with lacquered shelves and a single older woman sitting behind a desk carved with phoenixes. She gestures to a cushion. You sit. She speaks softly, as if worried the silk might overhear. We need you to record something unusual. You wait. There has been a death of an artist, one of ours. He designed the imperial summer robes. You nod slowly. Natural causes? Not quite. She slides a scroll across the table. It reads, Cause of death. Refused to replicate a dragon pattern, incorrectly requested by court. Withdrew from duty. Refused food. Declared intent to preserve the integrity of thread. Died after 10 days. You look up. He fasted to death over a robe? Yes. A beat of silence. You want me to record this as an execution? No, she says. But we want it remembered as one. You let that settle. And in the silence, you understand. This man, Wei Tian, chose his death. But not for glory. For aesthetics. He died so a dragon wouldn't have too few claws. So that court symbolism wouldn't collapse into confusion. So that art, of all things, would mean something. You open your scroll case, dip your brush. You write, Al Wei Tian, master artisan, died voluntarily after rejecting order to alter dragon design. Final words, if the claws lie, the heavens may follow. The woman across from you exhales. Thank you. No stamp, you ask. She shakes her head. No, this is for a different kind of archive. You don't ask questions. You've learned not to. As you walk back through the fragrant halls, you pass a robe on display. Gold silk, crimson, embroidery, clouds dancing around dragons. You notice it immediately. 5 claws, the full set, which means his version 1. Somehow, you stop and admire the detail. You think about the man who starved to keep those claws intact, the man who refused to bow to bad taste. Historians still argue whether artisan protests influenced imperial fashion. Some claim it was all tightly controlled, that nothing symbolic ever slipped through. Others suggest moments like Wei Tian's death quietly shaped the visual language of the dynasty. One thread, one refusal at a time. You believe it now. One man, one thread, one dragon. That night, you write a personal scroll. You file it between the flute boy and the satirical noble. Oh, Wei Tian died for thread, but really he died for truth. The kind of truth made from color and silence, the kind that whispers, even when no one listens. You place a small strip of brocade across the scroll's edge. No stamp, just respect. That evening, you sit outside under the stars with your wife. She hands you a steaming cup of tea. Long day? She asks. Yes, you reply. Did anyone make it through? You think for a moment, then say, yes, one robe did. She nods. And that's enough. The day starts with clear skies and the distant clang of someone somewhere regretting their cooking choices. You can smell burnt fish drifting from across the ministry wall. Unofficially, the most common smell of confession days. You expect a scroll waiting at your desk. You get two. That's never good. You read the first, execution scheduled, low profile, former clerk, accused of leaking documents to the northern border tribes. Routine, if oddly fast tracked. You read the second, another execution, also today, also expedited. But this one makes your stomach twist into origami because it's a fellow recorder. His name is Zun, not a close friend, but you knew him. You'd shared inkstones during festivals, traded jokes about the minister's wigs. He once gave you a bottle of plum wine with a note that read, for when your conscience finally riots. You remember laughing. You're not laughing now. You read the charges carefully. Negligence in duty. Recurrent marginal error in character formation. Potential falsification. Your eyes narrow because that's the charge you dreaded. Not betrayal, not sedition, just bad handwriting. Technically, it's a capital offense because if you write the wrong character, say for crime or method, you could alter the entire meaning. Execution becomes exile. Guilt becomes honor. Entire fates hinge on the curve of a single stroke, but usually it's corrected, reviewed, quietly dismissed. Not this time. You arrive at the courtyard earlier than usual. 2 platforms are set today. Parallel. That's rare. You record the first execution, smoothly, efficiently. The clerk confesses, claims ignorance. You almost believe him. Then it's Zun's turn. He looks thinner, paler, like someone who's been copying scrolls in a cave for years, instead of working 3 desks down from you. You nod when he meets your eyes. He nods back. Silent understanding. You dip your brush. Your hand hesitates on the line for charge. It feels brittle, unworthy. You write it anyway. Negligent strokes, resulting in judicial ambiguity. You can't even bring yourself to name the scroll he botched, because you suspect, you know, it was never about the strokes. You glance at the reviewing magistrate. Too neat, too confident, the type who sharpens his brush tips with a ruler. He reads the statement aloud, doesn't flinch. Shun is asked for final words. He offers a half smile. Tell them I died for poor penmanship. That way, I'll live forever in dread. Someone behind you coughs to hide a laugh. You write it down. The blade comes down without hesitation. Thunk, clean, no stumble. As if someone really wanted this one done correctly. You step aside. You wipe your hands. You seal the scroll with the phoenix stamp, trying not to imagine how Jun would have mocked that. Back at the ministry, you check his desk. It's already cleared. Everything gone, except one thing, a single sheet tucked under the blotter. You slide it out. It's a character, just one, drawn over and over, like he'd been practicing. It reads, "The truthful, upright." But some strokes are too long, some too short, a few nearly perfect. You fold it and tuck it into your sleeve, not for the file, for yourself. Historians still argue whether scribes in the imperial courts were artists or bureaucrats. Some say they were trained into obedience. Others believe a few quietly rebelled through flourishes, spacing, subtext, through the absence of correction. You stand by the belief that every stroke is a choice, and every choice carries weight. That night, you sit by candlelight, ink drying on your fingers. You reach for a fresh sheet and start writing Zun's name, just once, in your own hand, carefully. Then, beneath it, may the margins judge what the masters ignore. You fold the scroll, no seal, just truth. Some days, it's not about the execution, it's about everything around it, the before, the after. The awkward silence of people realizing too late that a name is missing from the roster, or that someone else has taken over their tea shelf. Today begins with that kind of hush. You arrive at the ministry and immediately sense it. The clerks are too quiet, the guards too stiff. The gossip circle by the south window, where people usually discuss dumpling prices or who got promoted to a better broom, is empty. At your desk, a sealed envelope, not a scroll, a letter, personal. You unfold it. The handwriting is neat, too neat, which means it was dictated. Someone's trying to be official, but it's not their job. We regret to inform you that Recorder Luan has been removed from service. His scrolls are to be reviewed. Please report to Hall 3 for record reassignment. You sit back. Luan, another recorder, older than you, the one who used to chew bamboo stalks while working, which made everything around him smell like damp wood and quiet judgment. He was meticulous, a little dull, but honorable. You go to Hall 3. A clerk hands you 3 scrolls, all from Luan's desk. You're told blandly, they require recopying. From scratch. You pause. Were they wrong? The clerk shrugs. No one said that. You take the scrolls. Back at your desk, you unroll the first. Execution. 2 weeks ago. Charge. Improper canal construction resulting in deaths during flooding. You scan the rest. Flawless. But something catches your eye. The final words. They read, "We warned them. The river warned them louder." Poetic. Too poetic. You flip the scroll over. In the margin, small and faint, written sideways. Failure by governance, not by the accused. Your pulse quickens. You open the second scroll. Another execution. A grain inspector accused of hoarding. Final words. My family ate dirt. Marginal note. Demand outpaced supply. Confiscation patterns skewed. The third scroll, even cleaner. No margin note this time. But the tone is subdued. Not deferential enough. You understand suddenly, Luan wasn't wrong. He was honest. Too honest. And someone noticed. Historians still debate the fate of honest scribes. Whether they disappeared quietly or were absorbed into some less visible department. Mines, borders, wall repair crews. But the records always remain suspiciously tidy afterward. You rewrite the scrolls as ordered. You omit the marginalia. You preserve the facts. You betray the truth. Your hand shakes just slightly when stamping the phoenix mark on the copies. That night, as you prepare to file the originals into the fire-safe disposal bag, you pause and keep them instead, hidden, in the same drawer as the flute boy, the artisan, the ones who shouldn't vanish. You whisper a name. Luan. It feels heavy in your mouth, not because he's gone, because he's erased. Later that week, you receive another envelope. This one smells faintly of ink and river reed. Inside is a single slip of paper. No name, no signature, just a line. Thank you for not rewriting me. You stare at it. Your skin prickles. Someone knows. Or maybe everyone does. Just no one says it out loud. You tuck the paper away. Not with the scrolls. Not on display. Between your desk and the wall, where the ink fades slower. You start dreaming in characters. Not scenes, not dialogue, just ink. Pouring down walls, slipping between your fingers, pooling into familiar strokes that won't quite hold their shape. Sometimes they're names, sometimes they're just the word for silence, repeating over and over like it's trying to remind you of something you never wanted to forget. You wake up before dawn. Again, there's a strange clarity in the darkness, when the rest of the city still sleeps, and your inkstone hasn't yet been touched. You light a small oil lamp. The flicker makes your brushes cast tall, crooked shadows. They look like trees in a storm. When you arrive at the ministry, a surprise awaits you. A visitor, not an official, not a courier. A monk, shaven head, simple robe, straw sandals, and a scroll tucked under one arm like he's brought you a message from a mountaintop. He bows. May I request a moment of your time? You glance around. Technically, the answer should be no, but the monk's presence feels precise, like he knows things move too fast here, and he's come to interrupt it gently. You nod. He lays the scroll on your desk. This was found in the Outer Temple archive. It is unsigned, but we believe it was meant for you. You unroll it. Your heart tightens. It's one of your scrolls. A copy, but altered. Someone has taken one of your older execution records, one you thought had vanished into the sea of silence, and rewritten it in verse. It's a poem now, rhythmic, sharp, still faithful to the facts, but made beautiful. And at the end, this line, this man's name, though erased, will live on because someone inked it straight. You reread it twice. The monk bows again. We believe words like these belong somewhere safe, perhaps not where fire waits. You glance at your drawer, the one with the forbidden scrolls, the private archive of the nearly forgotten. You ask, who sent this? The monk only says, someone who survived your brush, and then he leaves. You sit in silence for a long time after. Later that day, you're assigned a public execution. Open square, large crowd, a woman accused of forging imperial papers. Harsh penalty, but expected. Document forgery is considered nearly as treasonous as speaking your mind in public. You arrive early. She is already there, middle-aged, calm, her face unreadable. You begin your standard questions. Name, rank, crime, details of confession. She pauses, then says, I forged one paper. You nod. That much you know. But it wasn't an imperial letter. You blink. Then what? She stares out toward the horizon. A rice allotment slip. For a widow with 6 children. Her quota had been miscalculated. I corrected it. You pause. But you stamped it with the emperor's seal. Yes, she says, because otherwise they'd have ignored it. You write that down, and you feel your stomach tighten. She continues. She lived another year. 2 of her sons survived. One joined the scholar track. You can't speak, because you know what's expected, but you also know you're writing the story of someone who broke the law to preserve a life. When asked for her final words, she simply says, truth doesn't always wear the right robes. You seal the scroll. The crowd is rowdy. The execution is swift. And you write the record as required. But that night, you copy the scroll again. You change nothing, but at the bottom, in your own marginalia, you write, forged a seal, but not the truth. You tuck the scroll beside the poem. Your drawer is full now, not just with ink and paper, but with people, with echoes. Historians still argue whether scrolls ever truly saved anyone, whether records were just burial shrouds for the condemned, or if sometimes they became anchors, reminders, rebellions, folded neatly. You think they can be both. You walk home slowly that night, watching your shadow stretch and curl with every lamp you pass. When you reach the house, your daughter greets you. She's holding a brush, a bad one, bristly, unbalanced, clearly borrowed. I made you something, she says. It's a scroll. Terrible strokes, crooked lines, but at the bottom, a smiley face drawn in ink. You ask, "What's it say?" She says proudly, "It says you write good stories." You kneel beside her, and for a moment the weight lifts. Just enough. You've started noticing something strange. People greet you differently now, not with fear, not exactly with respect either, but with caution, as if you're not quite dangerous, but adjacent to danger, like someone who sleeps beside thunder but doesn't get burned. The baker near the ministry gives you an extra bun without explanation. A stable hand nods at you like you've shared a secret. One of the junior scribes actually bows, and you're fairly sure he outranks you in both salary and social standing. You're not sure when this started, but you suspect it was the poem, the monk, or maybe it's just the slow build of names behind the ink, the scrolls that don't get filed, the truths that stay folded. Today, though, there's no time for reflection because your docket isn't a scroll. It's a box, an actual wooden box, about the size of a folded robe. No seal, just your name carved into the lid in delicate strokes. Inside, three items: a blank scroll, a crimson ribbon, and a single white feather. You sit back. The message isn't written, but you understand it. It's a test. The blank scroll is for you to write. The ribbon means discretion. Palace eyes are watching, perhaps only palace eyes. And the feather? The feather is from the Imperial aviary, symbol of the Empress's court. This isn't just an assignment, it's an invitation or a threat. The letter that arrives an hour later confirms your suspicion. It reads, "The Empress has requested a record, not for trial, not for archive, for clarity. Your skill has been noted. Come to the Jade Hall. Midnight." You have never been to the Jade Hall. You didn't even know anyone like you could be summoned there. At midnight, the palace is nearly silent. The guards wear layered silks instead of armor. Their footsteps make no sound. You are led past gardens that smell of rain and memory. The Jade Hall is smaller than you imagined, less opulent, more intimate. It smells of sandalwood and pressed linen. The only light comes from 6 lanterns floating in bowls of water. The Empress sits behind a curtain. You do not see her, you only hear the soft rustle of silk when she shifts. And then her voice, soft, young, controlled. "I would like you to write a version." You bow low. "A version of what, Your Majesty?" "A death," she replies. "A necessary one, but not one I wish remembered plainly." Your throat tightens. "I understand." A scroll is passed through the curtain. It already contains a name, a court official, recently deceased. Official cause, illness. But the real cause? You read the side note. Brief, brutal. He had conspired with foreign envoys, leaked harvest projections, plotted instability. You glance up, though you can't see her. "Your Majesty wishes it written as natural?" "No," she says. "I wish it written as inevitable." You pause. That's harder, because inevitable means blame no one, but imply everyone. You unfurl the scroll. You dip your brush. You write. He passed as a leaf falls, unresisted by branch, but long loosened from the tree. You wait. Silence. Then, the rustle of approval. A moment later, the scroll is taken. You are handed another object, a brush. Not yours. Gold handled, thin, weighted at the center. A gift, she says. Use it only when writing what must be seen, but not fully read. You bow again. You're let out in silence. You don't breathe until the gates close behind you. That night, you lay the brush beside your cot. You don't sleep, not because of fear, but because you feel the pull of power and the danger that comes with crafting not truth, but version. Historians still argue whether the Jade Hall ever involved recorders directly. Some say the Empress kept her own scribes, loyal only to her. Others suggest certain bureaucrats were drawn into her narrative web and asked to reshape the empire's memory with a flick of ink. You never confirm it, but you do sharpen that golden handled brush, and you place it in its own box, beside your private drawer, beside the scrolls that remind you who you were before anyone started whispering your name in the dark. The rooster crows before the sun, as if it's afraid you might oversleep on your destiny. Again, you swing your legs over the side of the cot and immediately step on a brush. Not the gold one, the old one, the one that's been fraying for months, but still clings to its dignity like a scholar in retirement. You light the lamp. You blink at the mess on your desk. 20 scrolls. Some sealed, some open, some waiting. And beneath them all, folded with care, the one you didn't write. The Empress's scroll. The inevitable death. You haven't seen it since that night in the Jade Hall. You'd hoped it would disappear, absorbed into palace annals, buried beneath ceremonies and banquet schedules. But here it is, returned, with a crimson mark in the upper right corner, a subtle request for revision. The instructions are written in code, but you recognize the pattern. She wants the ending softened. The leaf metaphor? Too sharp? You stare at the scroll. You dip your gold brush. And you rewrite, he departed like dew under morning light, vanishing with grace, expected by all. You want to gag, but you finish the stroke, you seal the scroll, and you file it into the Empress's courier box with the kind of grim dignity usually reserved for folding funeral clothes. Your own docket for the day is mercifully blank. No new executions, no public charges. But the silence is misleading, because halfway through your second cup of tea, a courier delivers a list. Not a scroll, not a letter, just a list. Names, 27 of them. Future executions, unscheduled, pending, but they're real. Each marked with a faint symbol of approval from various departments. Harmony, agriculture, trade. Some are names you know, a poet, a former guard, one of the ministry's map makers who used to sketch birds in the margins of his scrolls. At the bottom of the list, a space for the recorder's name. Yours is already written in. You put the list aside. You stare out the window. The rain begins again. Quiet, gentle. You reach for your private drawer. It's full now. Too full. Flute boy. Satirical noble. Wen. The artisan. Lu An. Shun. The woman who forged justice. Wei Tian with his 5 clawed dragons. Zhao Jin with his haircut regret. You've saved their stories, the only way you know how. But it's not enough anymore. Not when the Empire wants you to write faster than memory, smoother than guilt, and softer than truth. You reach for a new scroll. You don't label it. You don't seal it. You simply begin. This is not an execution record. This is what falls between the brushstrokes, the margins, the pauses, the ink that dried too fast. You write all night. Names, moments, jokes, mistakes. Everything you've remembered. Everything you weren't allowed to keep. Historians still argue whether a recorder ever went rogue. Whether someone buried a secret archive under their floorboards. Whether a private collection of unofficial truths once survived long enough to outlive the dynasty. Some dismiss it as folklore. Others whisper of a lost scroll, one never sealed, one that told the whole story. Not the state version, but the version with mess, humor, heartbreak, and smudged corners. You don't care what they believe. You just keep writing. The list of 27 stares at you from the desk. You leave it there. You don't pick up your brush. Not yet. Not today. Because the Empire has plenty of people to remember the rules. But someone has to remember the people. And for once, you choose to be that someone. Not the recorder, just the writer. The ink dries slowly now. Your hands, once steady and practiced, linger on each stroke, like they're saying goodbye to something unspoken. The lantern flickers lower. Outside, the rain hushes the streets into stillness. You hear nothing but the breath of your own thoughts and the distant drip of water off roof tiles. The drawer beside you is closed now, heavy, but not burdened. Each scroll inside carries more than fact. They carry memory. Messy, imperfect, utterly human. Memory. You don't know if anyone will ever read them. You're not sure that matters anymore, because in the quiet, there's something sacred in simply keeping. Your robes rests folded beside the cot. Your brushes sleep in their case, and the gold-handled one, hers, is placed gently on the shelf, untouched since its last use. Not every tool needs to be used. Some are kept for moments that may never come. You exhale, a long, slow breath that feels like it belongs to someone else. The world has narrowed to this room, to these pages, to this pause between everything that was and whatever comes next. Outside, a rooster murmurs in its sleep. Somewhere a city forgets, but not you, not tonight. Tonight the names are safe, and you can rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.